What if I told you a Saturday morning cartoon once went too far? That in its colorful ghosts, its booming proton packs, and its monster of the week plots, there was something much darker hiding underneath. Something that made studio executives step in and say, change it, before people start asking questions. Now imagine this. You're a kid in the late 80s. You plop down in front of the TV with a bowl of cereal, the milk slowly warming, as the opening theme of the Real Ghostbusters blasts from the speakers. But tonight, when you close your eyes, you don't dream of heroes saving the day. You dream of a shadow, a figure that doesn't belong in the world of cartoons. And you're not alone. Children across the country start describing the same dream, the same figure, down to the smallest, sickening detail. Doesn't that feel strange? Here's where the story takes its first twist. When the Real Ghostbusters debuted in 1986, the creators wanted to stay true to the original film. Creepy, unsettling, sometimes funny, but always tinged with danger. Early concept art proves it. Ghosts weren't goofy blobs with silly faces. They were skeletal, dripping, sometimes barely human. Some looked like they had walked straight out of a nightmare rather than a comedy. And yet, somewhere between that early vision and the final broadcast, the tone shifted. The ghost became brighter, almost playful. Even Slimer, once a disgusting monster, was softened into comic relief. But why? Why would a studio deliberately drain the terror from a show about ghosts? According to whispers that have circled animation circles for decades, it wasn't just about scaring children. It was about what one episode predicted. Buried in the first season was a script, never aired in its original form. It told the story of a haunting in a tall glass skyscraper, one that stood in a crowded city center. In the episode, a darkness spread to the upper floors, elevators stalling, phones ringing with no one on the other end, shadows lingering against the walls even when the lights were bright. The Ghostbusters battle something they call the Echo, a ghost that isn't a person, but the memory of a future disaster, clawing its way backward through time. That sounds like harmless science fiction, doesn't it? But here's where it turns chilling. A few years later, in that same city, in that same style of building, the real world suffered catastrophe that mirrored the cartoon almost line for line. Witnesses described shadows moving in the smoke, phones buzzing in empty offices. Survivors swore they saw figures rushing past them in the stairwells, people who were never accounted for. And suddenly, executives were scrambling because parents had already complained that the early episodes were too frightening. But now the show wasn't just frightening, it was prophetic. Imagine being in that boardroom. The writers swore they'd invented it all. Just coincidence, just fiction. But the higher-ups didn't care. They ordered changes, fast. Out went the skeletal designs. Out went the dripping, bone-white faces. Ghosts would now be green, purple, orange. Anything but real. Episodes were rewritten. Tone was softened. And the show, once on the edge of horror, leaned into comedy. But here's the detail that haunts me. Before the changes, that episode aired once, in a nearly uncut version, in a single region. Just enough to leave an imprint. Children who watched it didn't just forget. They had nightmares. And decades later, some of them, now adults, say they remember things from that episode that don't exist in the archived scripts. They describe a figure standing in the reflection of the skyscraper windows, a figure with no face, watching. Some swore they saw him again years later, on the news, standing in the smoke of a very real disaster. That's the part you won't find on official DVD releases. The so-called Echo episode has been scrubbed, redrawn, or replaced entirely. What survives are only fragments. Storyboards tucked away in private collections. Sketches where the ghosts look too real, almost as if they were based on photographs rather than imagination. Now, let me ask you this. Was it all coincidence? A clever writer stumbling on a nightmare scenario by accident? Or did the Real Ghostbusters tap into something else? Something that lives just beneath the surface of our world? Think about the concept of the Echo again. A ghost of a future tragedy bleeding backward into the present. If time is not a straight line, but a circle, maybe some stories aren't invented at all. Maybe they're remembered. That's a heavy thought to put inside a children's cartoon, isn't it? No wonder the studio panicked. Because if a group of animators could sketch the face of tomorrow's disaster without meaning to, what else might they have accidentally revealed? And that's why the Real Ghostbusters had to change. That's why Slimer went from monster to mascot. That's why episodes became brighter, safer, almost silly. Because once you see your cartoon mirrored in the headlines, you don't want to take that risk again. And yet, the shadows of those early designs remain. You can feel them in the way Egon's eyes widen when he stares into a monitor. You can sense in the pauses, the eerie sound design, the way the ghosts never fully let you laugh without a shiver. The show still carries the fingerprints of something darker, even if most of us were too young to notice. Flip through the old cells, the sketches, the production notes, and you'll see what I mean. There's a weight there, as though the animators themselves didn't realize what they'd drawn until it was too late. So maybe the question isn't why the show predicted the future. Maybe the question is, how many other cartoons did the same, and we just never noticed? The past and the future, tangled in children's programming. Ghosts that aren't really ghosts at all, but warnings. And a generation of kids who still remember one nightmare too clearly, even if the tapes themselves are gone. Maybe that's the scariest part. If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows of Saturday morning, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Who knows? Your memory might help unlock the next mystery we uncover.